Want to get started. Again, this is a very aggressive agenda we're going to try and cover. I have 8 o'clock down here. I'll be more than happy to stay afterwards. A couple things, you'll have to forgive me. I've had a cold all week, so my voice is going to stay out as long as possible. And let me set the stage here for this video. This is this morning, and I was talking about transit and homeless issue. One of our employees had just left here when this occurred. As you can see, the gate shutting down right there. And then all of a sudden, you're going to see a transient homeless just run right across the screen. Right there. That was in the back of the police department this morning. Well, it's the same bear. It's the same bear. The bear's still in the tree over there. So as I continue to talk right here, you're going to see him. Right up here, you'll see him climb our gate right there. So, but that started off in a little light where I wanted to at least set the stage here so we can all relax, get on the same page. There's going to be a lot of questions answered, I hope, tonight. We'll be happy to answer all of your questions if you have it. Hopefully, we're going to provide you some information that you might not have and that we can all take away here. This is going to be interaction, dialogue throughout the whole program. Somebody will be taking some notes. If you have some suggestions or you have some questions that we can't get answered, we'll be more than happy to get them answered when we get moved after this if I can't answer them today or the presentation can't answer them. So again, we're here to talk about public safety and homeless transient updates. The agendas, hopefully everybody's got a copy of them. Again, very aggressive, but before we get started, and like I said, I wanted to stay on track, let me introduce Mayor Matt Spokley.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here tonight. We've spent quite a bit of time, I've spent quite a bit of time, and I know the rest of the council has as well, fielding questions related to the homeless situation in our community. I wanted to do this forum to give everybody an opportunity to better understand what we're doing here at City Hall with our law enforcement and code enforcement officers, as well as to hear from some of the community members on some of their observations. So again, what I'm hopeful that we leave here tonight is kind of a better understanding of what each side is doing, better understanding from the community as to what concerns you guys see out there in your travels, and come up with game plan moving the city forward. This is an issue that doesn't just affect the city of Auburn. It doesn't affect just Placer County. It's an issue that we're dealing with across the nation, with the cities and counties in California in particular, with some of the state legislature that John will cover. That's kind of creating a bigger effect on our community here with these populations. So hopefully everybody will gain something out of this. We are respectful of everybody's time. John's put together a great schedule. Some of the sections might run a little long. If they do, we'll try to adjust as we move this forward. But John, thank you for putting this together. Bob, thanks for allowing the resources to get this thing done. And let's get going.
All right, thanks, Mayor. When it comes to, and Placer County I'll talk about there, when it comes to really law enforcement efforts in regard to homeless, our whole goal is to get people into some type of housing. I heard a statistic earlier this week. They were talking with an advocate group down in LA's Skid Row, and 80% of the people they deal with, that's the lifestyle they want to live. They're not looking for any help. That's just the way they want to live, 80%. And so I would imagine, and Placer County might have better stats than I do, it's probably about the same here. The mayor mentioned a few things that we all are having to deal with, and I don't want to make this political, but we're running into a lot of these things that these 3 initiatives have created. AB 109, what that did is transfer responsibility for housing and supervision of some sentenced felons to counties. What does that mean? Somebody gets arrested for burglary. They're sentenced to Placer County Jail for, let's just say 1 year, make it easy. They're sentenced to Placer County Jail for 1 year. I arrest somebody for trespassing. Their jail's filled, they let us know they can't come to jail because that bed is filled. So there's nowhere to put them. So what we do is give them a citation for that trespassing. So the ripple effect happens, starts down in the state of California, but it impacts us here in the community. Prop 47, reduce sentences for drug possession and thefts under $950. It used to be $450. So if somebody went into a business, sold something $451, we would take them to jail for a felony. Now that's a misdemeanor all the way up until $950. It used to be throughout the majority of my 32-year career, you'd arrest somebody for possession of heroin, possession of ecstasy, possession of methamphetamine, possession of cocaine, possession. It would be a felony. You would automatically take them to jail. Not anymore. Now it's misdemeanors. Again, we have to go out there. They might not be able to house those misdemeanors. They might be getting a citation in the field. Prop 57, early release of state inmates and tougher rules to get juveniles charged as adults. How does that impact us here in the county? What that did is take away a lot of the state responsibility when it came to after they get released from jail. These people are going to get out of jail, there's no doubt about that. They're just getting out a little earlier, but the lack of supervision that's not there anymore. Probation does a really good job. We have high offenders. We have a whole task force. People on a task force dedicated to these high-level offenders who are part of these programs, but it doesn't cover everything that used to be in place to where we are today. There's a map right over there. This is really bad. And this was as of earlier this week. And I know when I walk out of here, there's probably going to be more. But these are all the camps that we've identified here in the city around Auburn. Abandoned debris, active, and these last two right here were Auburn Recreation District. Those are now cleaned up. So that map over there is a lot more accurate than the one I have over there. But there are actively, right now, we do not know of any active camps in the city of Auburn. But I'm sure we're going to walk out here, somebody's going to tell me, hey, I saw something down here as soon as we leave. These are address unknowns. These are all our crimes associated with people we believe could be homeless. Believe it or not, not everybody likes to give us their address, so there's probably going to be a few flyers, outliers here that just didn't want to give us their address. But generally, most of these people are going to be with homeless. And you're going to see some huge spikes here in the first 6 months of this year. But we really started doing a better job of collecting our data in 2016. So have we seen an increase? Absolutely. I'll be the first to admit that. But is it that drastic? Probably not. I'll be honest, we didn't do a good job of tracking this type of behavior up until that point. So these are total incidents.
And John, the reporting, the address unknown, that's people that your officers are talking with, or writing up or whatever.
We get a call of a person who's sitting in the park that's intoxicated, address unknown. We get a call of a person who they believe is camping on a private lot, address unknown.
Thank you.
Again, address unknown, and this lays it out. It's in the 563. Here's the type of calls we're talking about: trespassing, camping violations. And we're going to talk about how we're trying to change the municipal code in regard to that a little later. Panhandling. We've seen a pretty big reduction in that. If you go back to in the actual panhandling, there's still some here. Again, I'll admit that. But we've seen a big reduction. That was a result of our panhandling ordinance. We had our people our citizens, educating them, letting them know that it's better to give to some of our social service organizations, some of our faith-based organizations, instead of handing that dollar out the window. So we have seen a decrease in our citations when it comes to panhandling. Intoxication, I'm going to talk about that a little later, what we're trying to do to limit some of that. Health and safety, there's going to be some drug charges there. Suspicious circumstances, suspicious vehicles, area checks, that's going to be the majority of them. Hey, we saw somebody down in this area. Welfare checks, and then indecent exposure 0, and then non-criminal context. Again, our officers are doing a lot more of these contacts. And I've told this story numerous times, so if you've heard it, I apologize. But when I started my career 32 years ago, if you would have told me about a panhandler on a corner, we wouldn't have went. We didn't. Police wasn't involved. Law enforcement wasn't involved back then in these types of calls for service. This is relatively a new thing, and I think we should be a part of this solution. But it's relatively a new thing where people are looking to law enforcement to solve this issue as we are now. And again, we're a big part of this. But we wouldn't have gone to camping, illegal camping calls when I started my career. We wouldn't have gone to panhandling calls. We just wouldn't have done it because that wasn't our job. Well, now it is, and again, we're doing a better job of addressing it, but we're not quite there yet.
Hey John?
Yes?
The blanks on that, was that just zeros or no data collected back a couple years ago?
No data collected, probably. And then you're seeing the zeros where we are collecting the data. Again, we're doing a better job of starting to collect these. We're breaking it down a lot more. Yes, sir.
Is there a next layer down that data that tells us what were officer initiated versus community initiated?
No, that doesn't say that. It's whether it's a call for service, and what he's talking about is, did somebody call 911, or did our officers see something out when they were driving around and initiate the contact themselves? And that call does not do that right there. I don't know.
So, yeah, I know this doesn't show it, but is that data available next layer?
No, we don't do that yet. We don't have that ability. We hand count most of our statistics. We're working with the county right now to implement a new CAD system. We're getting closer and closer, where, again, our CAD system's 22 years old plus. So, again, a lot of this data wasn't there when we implemented our CAD system. Within the new computerized CAD system, we will be able to track that a lot better than we're
So
doing.
the data's there, you just can't extract it very effectively. Is that true? Because you'll know if it's an officer.
Yes, we could extract it, but you literally have to go through line by line. Address unknown, again, tracking it by month. We need to know where our officers during the months. And as you can see, in this black line is the first 6 months of this year. Everything is higher throughout this year. But again, a lot of that I think has to do with community's awareness of calling on us. I think a lot of it has to do with the officers who are engaging a lot quicker in regard to these types of crimes. Arrests. Again, you can see a huge blip. 93, and then we're at 79, so we're definitely going to track higher than we did last year. What were these arrests for? Trespassing, warrants, burglary, public intoxication, with the exception of warrants, is the largest one up there. And again, we're working with our businesses. We had a call a couple of years ago at one of our, I guess they sell liquor. I guess it would be not a liquor store. What's it? Convenience stores. And they called us and they said, hey, this guy's passed out over on aisle 3. Well, how many times have you served him to get him to that point? Now you're calling us that he's passed out on aisle 3. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to the community. I'll be with you in 1 second. Because you should stop serving him just like somebody at a bar should stop serving when somebody's overserved. If he's there 4 times in a net couple hours, you need to just say, we're refusing right to serve you. Because that's not fair to serve him up until the point he passes out in your store, and then you call us. Yes, sir.
Is there any data on where the warrants were issued? Out of state, out of county?
Again, we could probably pull that. We don't have it up there. We don't really keep track of that. It's just that we took some type of arrest for a warrant, and I would imagine the majority of our warrants are in county. The majority of them are local. I would say 80+% are probably local. And then the rest are probably Sacramento County. Every once in a while you get a flyer from another county or another state. Another arrest by month. Again, as you get to summer, you start to see more of them. And it happens every year. In the majority of our time, our highest years are in August. And there's probably no doubt, again, we haven't collected that as yet, but there's probably no doubt that we'll probably, August will be our busiest month to get. Citations, again, we can't arrest everybody. Sometimes we have to give them a citation. And as you can see, our camping is our largest citation. Public intoxication is our second largest. Yes, sir.
0 petty theft.
That's citations. And again, we work with some of our businesses, but not all of our businesses here in town. Some of them have policies where they will not call us and prosecute. We cannot force prosecution on these people. They literally will tell us they just want that person gone. They do not want to spend the time to actually prosecute that individual. I saw a question way in the back. Yes, ma'am.
We can't hear back here because there's something running, so we can hear you because you're facing us, but everyone else, if you could speak up just a little bit.
He asked it 0 for petty theft. And those are the statistics for the first 6 months of this year, 0. And then you heard my explanation about the businesses? Okay. So, now that I know that, I'll repeat the question up here. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. But again, you can see the first 6 months of this year, there are more citations issued to homeless people or somebody address unknown as compared to the whole year of 2016. Address unknown citation by month, again, just another statistic that we are looking at. Any questions in regard to that? And we'll get to the code enforcement. Let me go to the previous one. And again, I want to, any questions in regard to the statistics? I ran through them very quickly. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
So we saw an increase, a previous spike in the first 6 months. And I know, based on our conversations over the first 6 months, we've actually done extra patrols.
Yes, and
Specifically related to this homeless situation.
yeah, you're taking away some of my thunder for later on, but yes. He is the mayor, he can do whatever he wants. But yes, we have increased our extra patrols this summer months. We've dedicated some overtime, we've dedicated some overtime staff, we've dedicated some line staff that are out there on a regular basis. We've been aggressively addressing this a couple times during the course of the month, sometimes during the course of a week. And again, we found out towards the end of our, we've had to change it up a little because they're saying, hey, we know you guys are going to come through on Tuesdays. So again, we have to change up our patrols. But yes, we have aggressively and tried to address this with some overtime hours, as well as with some dedicating some of our staff when they weren't that busy on patrol. Yes, sir.
I agree with the laws that you showed. I can see the correlation with the homeless. Is there something else in Auburn that's making it attractive to attract so many? I see the number.
Great question. And what he asked there, did you guys hear that question? Okay, what he asked is there something else that attracts people? We've talked to some of our transients, and they have a really good communications network out there. So there is, a couple of years ago, there was actually, it was like a vagabond website that taught kids how to ride the rails across the country and visit, and actually within that, they actually said, come to Auburn, they're a giving community. It's easy to panhandle here. And so we've tried to address that. But again, we've talked to people, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but we have firsthand information that service providers from Sacramento have dropped some people off here. And again, I'm not trying to throw people under the bus. I'm just telling you, this is firsthand information that we've got received from some of these trains because we're trying to work with them. We want to find out how they got here, what they're doing here. But we do have some people who grew up in this area, they like this area, and they want to stay in this area. They just don't have a home to live in, and they don't have a family that they want to live with. But we have, so hopefully that answered your question.
It does. I know. I've lived here a long time, and I've known some of our local homeless. I even went to school with some of them. But there's so much more out there. So that did answer my
again, before we started our panhandling campaign, I sat over at Starbucks, hot sunny day, and I watched, in 15 minutes, I watched one panhandler with the dog get 6 bills handed out the window in 15 minutes. I timed it. So let's just say they were dollar bills. That's $24 an hour. That's more than some of my staff's making. A lady brought 2 bags of groceries in the same 15 minutes, gave them to this. By the time she got in the car, he was selling those groceries. True story. Yes, ma'am.
So the buses that drop the homeless off from other counties, does that mean that...
I didn't say buses. They're actually, I think they're private vehicles.
Okay, so when they drop them off in our county, does that mean that say for example, the Brighton Auburn homeless shelter in Auburn, I heard that they don't accept people from other counties, like they have to check somehow, is that true or not?
I think that was the early intention, but there are some people who are staying at the shelter who, when they have open beds, that are not from this county. Yes, sir.
You said 80%, according to a source in LA.
Yes, it was.
80%. Who was that source? And then I have a follow-up.
I'm sorry, it was a radio. I was driving down the road, and I can't give you that. I'll look it up. I'll try and find it. If you give me your email address, I'll try and hunt it down for you.
We'll go with that.
All right. Yes, sir.
People that you are approaching on the street and all that, you said there's a lot of people. They're like the same people you keep chasing day after day, week after week, month after month.
We have a certain group of people that we do contact regularly, and they've been contacting them regularly for numerous years. This isn't just happened in the last couple years. It's been going on for a while. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody who's new to town or we haven't come across, but generally the majority of people that we're contacting are people we've contacted before. Yes, sir.
How about jail grievances? They become an unknown, they become transient. Do you track them?
Well, of course the jail is tracking who they're releasing. And as far as, if they have an address to go to, then there wouldn't be address unknown. But if they become homeless at that point, where they're released from jail and they don't have an address, we come in contact with them, then they would fall under the address unknown. Yes, sir.
The mayor said when he first spoke that the homeless issue seems to be a problem countrywide, that it's increased. And so it's increased, we know here up in Auburn, it's increased in Roseville, and we know through data it's increased in Sacramento, down to San Diego. So what is causing the increase other than everybody can't be going all over the place? So I mean, if Auburn is rising in homeless, and Roseville's rising in homeless, and Sacramento's rising in homeless, and San Diego's rising in homeless, how can it just be people coming in?
It might not just be people coming in, it might be people losing their homes, it might be people losing their jobs. There's a lot of societal issues that could be impacting this. I'm just talking from a criminal justice standpoint, the people that we're running into. I'm not here to solve all the homeless problems. I'm just talking about the people that I've come in contact with, and generally the people that we're coming in contact with have either some type of suspicious activity or they did something illegal activity. And so again, I'm not here to say why it's happening. Some of the people that we're running into are some of the 3 initiatives that were there. But there's, as you know, there's a lot of societal problems out there that's contributing to this. This isn't just us here in Auburn. It's across the region, across the state, and the articles that I'm reading, it's across the nation. Yes, sir, behind you. Go ahead, sir.
So,
No, at the table. I'll get to you one minute. At the table. Go ahead.
At about 1 o'clock yesterday, I physically witnessed with my own eyes a 15-passenger van packed going to the DeWitt Center. I don't know where they gathered them from, because I don't want to put out any names. That was the first time I'd seen that. And had I felt like it, I would have taken a picture, but I just don't do that. So.
Again, I can't speak to all the things that are going on, and so yes, sir.
So several of the folks in the audience have actually talked to a lot of the folks, like members of the council, the police department have as well, and interviewed some of them. You start to think about the transient nature. That's kind of an outcome of something that's more causal. And I've actually interviewed a couple of them. Why do you do this? And he said, well, I appreciate the handouts I get from places like Salvation Army or the stores for people, because then I don't have to buy clothes or food. I can spend it on my data plan and drugs and alcohol. So if you look at the next level, looking at what the causal factors are, it sounds like, yes, it's a problem, but it's an outcome. It's not a cause. So as law enforcement, public safety, and the council suggested that perhaps we focus on the causal factor of this rather than that person doesn't have to put a night on drugs, or might be a thief or something like that.
And again, great question, great comment. And when you start getting into cause like that on why they're doing what they're doing, we have, and I don't want to speak for council, but we have limited resources on how we can address some of those causal issues. And again, the last thing I want to do is, tell the Salvation Army not to help someone. Because again, if they're providing these people clothes, maybe some of them need it. And I wish there was a better vetting process, but the situation is what it is. So of course we're trying to prevent the cause, but there's a fine line there on what we can do to prevent the cause and still help the people that really need the help.
We're definitely looking at ways to make adjustments to our local ordinances to make it more challenging for some of those things that people save their money for, rather than buying shelter.
So just to find out, I'm sure a lot of people have questions, but back to what you pointed out, if we can't put you in jail for a cite, does that cite come with any meat, or is it just like, you pay your $20 or you don't pay it, so they're going to come?
No, generally what we're citing for a misdemeanor crime, so there is still a penal code and some sentences attached to that, but if they don't ever go to court, and the warrant keeps steamrolling, and they're still not placed for them to go, and they never get to court, then it's just a vicious cycle. And I'm not saying that we're going to solve the vicious cycle, because again, one of the good thing that's happened here in the probably I think in the last 60 to 90 days is they've created a booking center down in South Placer. So again, Roseville's booking now down there. And so again, that's going to help us all out because it's creating more space in the system for us to create some type of cause or some type of effect to what they're doing, the behavior that they're displaying. I'll get you in one minute, ma'am. You've been standing right back there.
Yeah, in these numbers, are these incidents or are these individuals?
Incidents. The arrests are obviously individuals, but the incidents are incidents.
Right, so do we have an idea of what the population of homeless are in all of these numbers?
Well, you know, the Placer County, they do it, I want to say, last time I heard in Placer County, there's 600? 663. And I would imagine here in Auburn, we're probably running into anywhere from 10 to 15 people on a regular basis.
And that's a one night point in time count. In January, it's just a single data point with HUD data that is usually 1/2 to 1/3 of the actual homeless population.
Okay. Fair enough. Yes, ma'am. Hi.
I've been on the homeless island.
Yes, ma'am.
I grew up here. We moved to Toronto, grew up here. It was a very safe, very nice area. Like, I loved it. I didn't have too much to do, and I tried drugs on my 21st birthday. I actually fell into them with always trying to hang out with people, not having friends. I went to drugs, became homeless, and I did the jail time, got out, and I was one of the unknown addresses. Even though I did have an address, it's just I wanted to still use, so I refused to give an address.
Okay.
Being that I was able to still go on commit crimes, use my drugs, and I was able to rely on all of the resources Placer County has to get on my needs. That's why I did not have to use drugs. I've been clean sober for 2 years. I now have 2 children, and I want to be a part of just fixing that. I cannot be that.
You need to come up here and take care of this. You got much better stories than I do. You got and we want you to be part of the solution. Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Hey, John, can you just summarize? We can't hear you.
She was just telling a story about how she used to be homeless here in the Auburn community and how drugs overtook her life, what she used to do to maintain her lifestyle, maintain her habits, and then she was just getting to the point where she said she had stopped using it, a couple children, and she's really turned her life around, and we should all be happy and applaud for what she's doing. Yes, so we applaud.
She wants to be part of the solution.
Right.
But a lot of people came up here because I still know a lot of them. I don't socialize, I don't acknowledge them. But when I was in that area, living in that lifestyle, a lot of people came up here because the drugs were easier, the drugs were cheaper. And once you're here, and then once you start the drugs here, you're kind of stuck. Nobody wants to travel. Too many people don't want to travel while in Placer County and under the influence or with the possession, because this is one of the worst counties to get caught with them. So too many people try not to travel, try to hide out in the bushes or wherever they are in the houses that they are using at. I know, so that had a big part of why too many people wouldn't move once they came here.
And we're here in Jackson. Okay, she was talking about they used to come here because the drugs were cheaper and easier to get. And then once they got here, they were kind of stuck here. And so everything I'm hearing from our drug task force who are on the street level is they don't like coming here because there is a lot more accountability for it comes in Placer County. We have the best DA in the state, in my opinion. He holds people accountable. Drugs are more expensive now than what we're seeing in Sacramento and some of the Bay areas. And they're not as easy to get. We've made a huge impact as far as some of the large-scale arrests that have been done. And these are not people who are in possession. These are people who are selling. And so they made a huge impact. So what we're seeing is it is more expensive, and they don't like getting caught here because, again, they're held accountable by our DA. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the slide of the clarification in regards to the address unknown. How do you guys go about finding the addresses unknown? Like, for example, I know several employees from right here in Auburn I'm actually the dinner coordinator for Right Hand Auburn, so I help organize a nonprofit organization to
Yes, ma'am.
make their fees. And would it be helpful to like find those address unknowns via the shelter? Because I heard they have to like, have an ID, know who they are, know where they've been, and like say a police officer, if they have an address unknown, they could go to the shelter and be like, do you know this guy? Do you know where they've been? Would that be helpful? Or is that?
It would be really helpful, but I'll be honest with you, I do not have the resources, and I'm not going to speak for any other law enforcement agency resources.
I guess that question would be more
To somebody we contacted who came across who hadn't committed a criminal violation. We contacted them, we determined that, we got their name, and they said they didn't have an address. It'd be really hard and resource strenuous for me to try and hunt that down on the back end and try and find that information out. I don't have the resources to hunt down after the fact to find out if these people do really have an address and they just didn't want to give it to
So
us.
I see a lot of the same people there. When I'm serving
Sure.
food there, I see a lot of the same people there. So I know, in fact, I'm serving 100 people a night, so I know for a fact that there are permanent residences there. So they are, in fact, living there.
And
we
I-
also have an additional 50 people in temporary residences where they stay one night and then they're booted out the next day just for a place to sleep. But I know for a fact that there are permanent people living
But if there was some way for us and I had the resources available, yes, to answer your question, that would be a valuable tool for me that I don't have right now. Yes, sir.
You kind of answered her question a little bit, pick off yours. Government does not have the resources. If it had, the problem would have been solved 20 years ago. Most homeless programs rely on government funding. If they're coming to Roseville, Auburn, because they say it's more attractive, then the opposite can be true. If it's unattractive, they won't come to Roseville, Auburn. In order to do that and reduce the number of transits, or people coming in from SAC, YOLO, Yuba, then the homeless organizations need to come up with a policy that they will not house, they will not service anybody who cannot show proof of residency that either live, work, or have family that currently resides in this county. And if the homeless organizations get on that page, then you will see a reduction, because through that same network that brought them here, will go out, do not go there. They will run you out of town. They will not accept you. They will not give you a loaf of bread. That might be uncomfortable to hear to some people, especially the faith-based community, but that is really one of the only ways you're going to reduce the number of people coming in.
Sounds like a legitimate idea. Yes, sir, ma'am.
To go off of what you're saying, I think it would be a good idea, like, I know we have the homeless shelter. Something I've always, since it started, I was thought, like, everyone needs to get out and work for something. So instead of doing their nightly check-ins, why can't they do like a weekly check-in? But while they're there, they have to go out and do community service.
And again, you're talking about the people who are running the shelter, and that's not what I'm here to talk about. I think those are great ideas, and those are some ideas that you should pass along to the people running the shelter there. And because again, I think that's a great idea, but that's not helping me today, and that's not helping the citizens of Auburn try and solve the problem that we have here today. Again, if you have some great ideas, let them know, because hopefully they'll follow up on your great ideas. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I used to have volunteers from like kids from high school, other volunteers throughout the town helping to serve the food. I stopped doing that a couple months ago, saying if they want to help, if they want to get out of there, if they want to graduations when they're financially stable, to move out of the residence area, I stopped having volunteers serve the food. Instead, I had them out. I just drop off the food when there's no church doing it, and I say, if you want to help out your own community, you serve the food yourself, and you can get that on the resume. And eventually, if you're going to apply for a job, you can say, I helped serve the food at my residence at the homeless shelter. So I'm like, you're on your own. You can serve your own food, and then you put that on the residence, put that on a resume, and have the VOA basically vouch for them.
Any other questions regarding? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, hi. What is the percentage of, you have the homeless folks?
Yes, ma'am.
People who want to be here because it's a nice climate and there's plenty of room to grow.
Various reasons.
Yeah, there's various reasons. So what is the percentage between people who want to be here and people who have to be here because they are parolees and they can't go that far because they have to do their check-ins.
Great question. I would hate to speculate because, again, we are not capturing that data on people who want to be here and people who have to be here. I can only speculate, I said about 10 to 15 people that we are coming in contact on a regular basis. None of them people need to be here. They generally just want to be here.
But are generally the people who are causing the rift?
Well, I think it's all of them. I mean, public intoxication is people who've been here for a long time. And some of these people, so, I mean, they are causing the rift. If they get passed out and they're drunk in a park and somebody's walking into that park, that's going to make them people feel uncomfortable. That person might have been arrested for being drunk in public 20 times over the last 5 years. And so again, it's hard to say that the people, and I would hate to say that just transient people, the people who are just passing by are causing all the problems. There's some long-term problems here that are being, they're happening or they're being perpetrated by long-term people who've been part of this community.
And, you know, I think there's a lot of long-term homeless people that are great here in the community. But I don't think the transient folks per se that are passing through, it's not necessarily a quick pass-through. I mean, they could be here because they have to stay here to generally have a more aggressive way of presenting themselves or dealing with situations because they have a pass.
It's kind of a mixture. The transient people, we have some people who literally just pass through. And then we have some people that get here and they stay here and we see them more and more often. Oh, yes, sir.
Does the city of Auburn have access to the homeless management information system so you can cross-check the different individuals that create the problems?
No, they don't.
No, I was going to say, I don't.
Why doesn't the city have that so they can interface that data with what's getting checked into the shelter? They have to check in with the homeless management information system. I mean, that's valuable data. When they do their point-in-time count, that's the information they collect. They collect addresses, social security numbers.
It's great information. And the shelters has that data?
Yeah.
Okay.
The county, it's the homeless management information system is a HUD, Housing and Urban Development requirement for any organization in the country that receives federal funding. It's HUD's attempt to get an accurate account instead of just a one-day count, to get an accurate count on just how many homeless are in the country. So Placer County Health and Human Services actually has funded for $2,500 licensing fee, most organizations within the county who serve the homeless. And that way, instead of a one-day homeless count, which is very inaccurate, we can get a much more accurate count. To follow up on this young lady's question, most of the data coming from counties or cities around the country, and again, how you define that they are from that city or county, I've never seen anything more than 20% that are not from that particular county or city. But again, how do you define that you're from here? Was it, I've been here 14 days, I've been here 3 months, I just got in last night. So devil's in the details on that one.
Sure. And like I said, thank you for bringing that attention. I didn't even know it existed. And if the county, if they're letting people have access to it, I want to get access to it. So we'll be working with them to find out. One second, Mal. Yes, sir.
So Director, I know you guys are pressed for time, just kind of keep track of your, you said in several meetings, and council meeting, that we're not going to rest our way out of this, we're not going to cite our way out of this.
Nope.
You assign some extra.
We have
controls.
extra.
Yep.
It might change your day, it might not. It's just, they just always kind of screw you a little bit. But, and I know there's been some requests for an overall city plan on what we're doing to address issues of which transients are a subset. But from a pure public safety perspective, what do you see as your strategy going forward?
Again, we need, from a public safety status, we need to limit the long-term access to, a great example is the West America Trail Park. Us going in there and cleaning out that whole park. That created a better public safety initiative. People can walk through there My officers can walk through there. They're not going to have people hiding in bushes that they can't see in the middle of the night. So continuing down that path to try and maintain our common space or open space a little better, but realizing that we have a canyon down there, that we're not going to maintain all the land down there. So, when you start looking at the West America Trail Park over there and what we did there, I mean, if you look at it, if you're in that park, you have access to 2 pretty good sized shopping centers, a liquor store at the top of the hill. There's a bubbling brook going by. It's not a bad place to be. And in the summertime, there's about a 20 to 25 degree difference down there as it was out in the open. So it wasn't a bad place to hang out and sleep. And so again, trying to reduce those types of spaces. We had a couple buildings that down here in Old Town where they were getting underneath and sleeping during the cold winter months. Again, working with the building owners, trying to reduce those access to that space. And again, I'm not opposed to arresting. I still, after 32 years, I still love arresting people who need to be arrested. And we're going to continue to arrest people. But this problem is not going to be solved by arresting everyone, because I can't arrest everyone involved in this problem. But the ones that do need to be arrested, do need to be cited, we will continue to do that. And
Why don't we move into code enforcement?
actually, let's move into Gary, legal issues real quick, and have Gary talk about that, and then I'll kind of go into code enforcement after that. And this is Gary Bell, he's our city attorney. He's going to talk about some of the legal constraints that I have to abide by or I'm going to jail. So.
All right, so I was asked by the Public Safety Director to provide a few comments on the legal background, including restraints and the types of laws and other enforcement actions the city can take in the context of homelessness and transients in particular. Oh, sure. Is this better for everyone? Yeah. All right, great. So I was asked to provide a few comments on the legal background here, including some restraints on the types of laws that the city can enact, and also the types of enforcement actions that the police department and other city officials can take in the context of homelessness and transient issues in particular. It may go without saying, but homeless and transient folks are entitled to the same protections under federal, state, and local law as anyone else, including the people in this room, this city, in this state, and this country. That includes federal constitution, state constitution, federal statutes, state statutes. All of these things constrain not only what the council can enact as a law, but how the police department can enforce those laws. And they come and ask me, and then I tell them, and they go from there. So these include freedoms like free speech, freedom of assembly, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, due process, equal protection. All these things apply equally with someone who's out in the community, just as they do when you are out in the community, or I'm out in the community, or anyone is out in the community. So generally, for enforcement and criminal law in particular, American criminal law does not allow the punishment of status. So we don't punish someone because they're an addict, we punish them because they possess a drug. And it's the same thing here. You can't punish someone because they're homeless, it is a status, any more than you can punish someone because they are a part of a particular racial group, or a male or a female, or national origin. So same things there. So, it doesn't mean that the city can't make and enforce laws. They can make and enforce laws that comply with all these requirements, federal and state requirements, and they can enforce them in a way that complies with the law. And these laws are set by people in Sacramento, people in Washington, D.C., courts in Washington, D.C., and other forces that are outside of the city's control but still bind what the city can do. And to the extent the city doesn't follow those, liabilities incur. It's not uncommon to have lawsuits from the ACLU, other advocacy groups, that come in and say, you have violated the constitutional rights of this particular group, civil rights action. There's state law reasons for bringing that and federal reasons for bringing that to you. So some common laws that address homelessness are subject to these restrictions. For example, solicitation out in public, that is protected by free speech. There's a First Amendment right to be out on public streets and sidewalks and talk to other members of the public. That doesn't mean that the city can't require a permit for that, or say that it can't be done in particular locations, like near a bank or an ATM, or other places where there might be a good reason why the city can't allow solicitation there.
Garrett, can I ask you real quick? Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt you. Does the city have an ordinance in place now that restricts certain locations like banks, ATMs?
Yes. In fact, the city has two separate ordinances that specifically address solicitation. One is an aggressive solicitation ordinance. If someone is soliciting for money or something else of value, and they're doing it in a way that intimidates people, is aggressive, they seem to not go away after the person says, please leave me alone, that's enforceable, that's a crime, that's a misdemeanor under the municipal code, and that can be enforced, definitely. There's another solicitation ordinance where you need a permit before you can solicit door-to-door on private personal property. City can require a permit, but the city can't require a fee for that permit because that fee would be a prior restraint to violate free speech. Can't require a permit. Did I answer the question? Okay.
I have another question on that.
Sure.
I've compared the city ordinance to the county ordinance, and there's some huge differences. Is there any reason why we don't have the same ordinance as the county? And the city of Roseville has identical to what the county has.
Well, I haven't reviewed the county ordinance specifically. The reason why there may be differences is because the city is its own jurisdiction and can come up with its policy reasons for adopting a particular ordinance as opposed to another one. So to the extent there are differences, yeah. Was there a specific difference that you were interested in seeing?
Well, do you really want to hear them all?
Hey, I'm a lawyer.
Well, I do think we need to.
I did send an email.
You did?
Did you get the email?
There's been so many times.
You're busy, I know.
But,
Yeah, because I did
He's
write down.
busy?
I asked the wrong person. Yeah, I did write down all the differences. We
Okay.
can discuss that at a different time if you want.
Well,
It's places, it's certain locations, more locations, and it's distances, big difference in distances.
yeah, so restrictions like that restrict the time, place, and manner of solicitation are all permissible as long as they're content neutral, they apply to everyone who's going to engage in the behavior, and as long as there's an alternative area where that speech can take place. So you can't create an ordinance that effectively says you can't do it anywhere.
Well, if the county can do it and the city of Roseville can do it, then it should be perfectly legal for Auburn to do it.
I'm assuming that ordinance doesn't prohibit it everywhere, though. The county one or the other ones.
It doesn't what?
Prohibit it everywhere. There would still need to be
Oh, no,
a
it's
place.
specific locations.
Yes.
It's within
I
100
agree.
feet of a stop sign or whatever, I don't know.
So yes, I think those would be permissible. Yeah.
Can you talk about the camping ordinances?
Sure, yeah. So as some of you probably know, the council recently adopted an update to the camping ordinance, some definitions that were updated, and also to make it clearer that the prohibition applies not only to public property, but also to private property, not to family and friends of private property owners, and not for more than 3 consecutive nights. So there have been several high-profile cases here in California in particular having to do with camping. You may have read them, some of them came up in the 90s. There's actually been one in 2015 here in Sacramento, where there was a lawsuit that went all the way up to the Court of Appeal, and it took a lot of time and energy for the city. But essentially, it goes to that distinction between status and conduct and what can be prohibited or criminalized under the code. So what these camping ordinances typically do is say, you can't use camp paraphernalia, because that's conduct. That's using a stove, that's using a tarp, it's using a sleeping bag. They're not saying that you can't be homeless or you're not allowed to sleep somewhere. They're saying you can't use a tarp. Right? So it goes to the conduct part. These ordinances still get challenged. There is a constitutional right to travel. Everyone has a right to travel over state lines, to get in their car and go up to Truckee or Reno for the weekend. So sometimes they're challenged on that basis. Sometimes they're challenged as discriminatory in their enforcement. So if the police choose to enforce a law only against a particular group of people, that's also unconstitutional as a violation of equal protection. So as long as these laws are being enforced equally against everyone who's camping in violation of them, and they're drafted in a way that prohibits conduct and not status, they're generally enforceable. And so that is the ordinance that the City Council recently adopted. Meets all those requirements.
Question.
Sure.
Can you go onto private property if somebody's there that might be possessing those items without permission of the property owner?
So merely possessing them, maybe not. If they do not have the permission of the private property owner, that would be a trespass, that is a crime, and the police could be called. So if that answers your question.
But do you need to get a letter from that property owner giving the police permission to do that? And does it need to be posted properly with signage?
Yes, there are sometimes trespassing letters that are on place. If there's private property where it's very common to have people trespassing on it, the police, and I understand that to be the policy, will sometimes get a letter from the private property owner saying, these folks are not allowed on my property. If you see anybody on here, it's a trespass. You feel free to come on and arrest them and take them on. So yes.
We do that with absentee owners quite a bit.
When you do go to like a place like that that has personal property of someone, what happens with that? Do you have to store it for them? Do you have to get rid of it?
So yes, you do have to store it. There are laws, state law and the civil code has very detailed provisions on abandoned property and how that has to be stored. It depends on the value.
And I'll get into that in the next section in the code enforcement process. I'll be more than happy to address that.
He's going to cover it.
Yes.
But yes, you got to keep it.
But for the property owner, a couple people have asked me, and I have no clue what to say, is for the property owner, they find somebody back in the back of their 5 acres, can they dispose of that person's possessions, or do they have to wait for law enforcement to do that?
So I will say what the statute says. The statute says that a private person who finds abandoned personal property
On their property.
right, is a depository for hire for that period of time and has to hand it over to the sheriff or the police department where you're in. And then there's a process for it to be noticed and kept for a period of time.
Truckload of.
Well, just like if anybody, if you drop your ring on the street and someone finds it, or, any of these types of things. That's what the law is meant to address.
So it's not that the items can't be removed, it's that we have to turn them over to the police?
You want to speak to how you handle that?
Well, again, we have limits when it comes to
I don't want the garbage.
when it comes to found property, we're not going to take trash. But when it comes to found property, we have, it's $100 value on it. If we can come out there and say, that's not worth $100.
Yeah, tents, vehicles, and the cops can't ever find the person staying in the tent, so it gets to stay. And it's been there for well over a year.
Yeah, we again, if you let us know and we can abate
It's got
that.
a big rip in it, it's less than $100.
All right.
He's not going to say that to you.
I just got a few more comments here. Maybe take 2 questions and then we'll wrap up where I'm going and we'll go from there. Yeah?
These ordinances fall in the parks too. Like if you see someone sleeping on the bench or next to the playground, is that considered camping or if they're just resting?
Well, if they're using camp paraphernalia, which includes a tarp or a sleeping bag, or these types of things. But yeah, if they're using it and they're there, yes, that would be against the city's current camping ordinance. Yes.
But to answer that, we also, there's different jurisdictions. The parks have their own rules in regard to our parks. The city does not run the parks here. So ARD and county park out there, those are run by a whole different governmental entity. And they have their own rules, and they work with us closely. And they have to file some of the same ones that we do. But now we're talking about 2 different jurisdictions here. And so it does get convoluted, but it's not really that convoluted, but it can get convoluted.
There's one more question back there. Yeah, go ahead.
So about the personal property, if I go to RBI in Roseville, there's a sign as big as day that says, don't hang around here. It says no loitering, no trespassing, Roseville Civil Code, yada, yada, yada. So I was going to call the property management company and ask how they were able to put that up. They said, well, when this property was developed, developers went to the city to make sure they had a code like that. And they were willing to work with the city to make sure that they did, so that they didn't have situations like we have center. And I've not seen any signs like that anywhere around in Auburn, other than Rock Creek School, which is out in the county, but that's a whole different situation.
Right.
Is there some reason why businesses aren't, or these business centers don't seem interested in having an environment that's panhandle free and things like that?
I don't know. I can't speak to businesses, and maybe Bob or the chief will be able to speak to why businesses may or may not be interested in the loitering ordinance. What I can say is loitering ordinances tend to be difficult to enforce because you're going to intent and purpose. So if somebody is hanging out at Starbucks for 4 hours with their friend, are they loitering? If somebody is there for 5 hours, is it loitering then? If they, only go there to use the restroom but don't buy anything, and then it becomes a factual issue, and then when you cite them, they challenge it, and then it's hard to prove it in court. So those types of ordinances, it doesn't mean you can't do them. It just means it becomes a difficult issue to enforce.
What you're saying is people hang out at Starbucks.
Well, I'm just saying there are reasons why you may be in a particular business for a period of time that may appear to be loitering, or may be difficult to distinguish
They
between.
establish that on their own, right? Because if you walk into, what's the other, Flower Garden? It says you can only hang here for an hour, you gotta go.
Right.
But that's
Well,
their
I think
decision.
then what you, maybe the distinction,
House.
maybe the distinction then is between a private business, which can essentially kick anyone off if they want to, and versus the city going in and enforcing it as a violation of law. So, yes, you're right, businesses can refuse service as long as they don't do it for a discriminatory reason or some other unlawful
Okay,
purpose.
so like the sign outside of our yard, just hanging out on the sidewalk there. That situation could exist in Auburn Town Center where they just don't want you hanging around the sidewalk. If the
Yes.
property owner decides that we don't want loitering, and we want to follow whatever the city code would be, we want to post the signs, they're well within their right to do that, and the city could enforce that.
Yes,
Yes.
is the short answer.
Maybe just a quick comment. I know lawyers are to keep us out of trouble, but you also can say what we can't do. What can we do lawfully? And let's focus on, instead of the can'ts, what are some of the things that we can do legally, effectively to, like you said, enforce the non-voter laws or whatever it is.
It's hard for me to step out of those shoes. There are a lot of policy decisions that are essentially in the hands of other folks in the city on how best to approach it in a legal way. So, are there things that can be done? Yes. Laws can be passed that are constitutional, and they can be enforced in a constitutional manner. The best way to approach this, I leave to better minds.
Well said.
That's why he's a lawyer.
So I'll wrap up too, because I think we're running a little bit late on the agenda, and I want to get through the rest of this. So I think I covered most of this. Just wanted to cover a little bit about the potential ramifications for either adopting an ordinance or enforcing an ordinance in a way that violates any of these rights. There have been federal civil rights lawsuits, state civil rights lawsuits. They oftentimes end in settlements, large monetary damages that the city has to pay out to those folks. Some of them end up in settlement agreements where housing is being built, other types of programs are being put in place. Doesn't mean that any of those are bad ideas. It just means that there is a likelihood, if these requirements are not followed, that there are legal ramifications for that. And so, that's probably why I'm here, I guess.
All right, and we'll get to you in 1 second. We're running behind here, and I want to give the county an opportunity to speak if they'd like, and address some of the things that they're doing out there and the team that they have in place, and the wonderful work that they're doing out there.
Yeah.
So,
I'll just stand right here. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Brian Silva. I'm a lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office. I'm currently the operations manager over our homeless liaison deputies. We have 2 of them here tonight, Mike Biggs in the back and Robert Bliss. The Sheriff's Office, about a little over a year ago, came up with a collaborative team. It consists of 4 deputies, 1 sergeant, probation, and HHS worker. That the main goal for the Sheriff's Office and these guys are to offer services to those who want it. As the chief spoke earlier, there's a certain percentage of the population that don't want help. They like that lifestyle. But for those who do need the help, this collaborative effort is there to guide them to the resources that are available to them. For those who don't want the help, their job is to hold them accountable, make it uncomfortable for them. Certain laws, again, it's not illegal, like the attorney said, to be homeless. However, it's illegal to be homeless and intoxicated in public. It's illegal to be trespassing. It's illegal to have narcotics on your person. So they use those tools to hold them accountable. So far, it's been very successful. We issued last year, we had 382 arrests and 188 citations were issued in the past year. between the 4 deputies that are assigned to the unit. Their job is to do nothing else but to go out and contact the homeless. Most of them known by first name, know their date of birth without even having to double check it. What else can I add? That's kind of a brief overview of what the sheriff's office has done.
We also work a lot in conjunction with the homeless shelter. I know I'm there every Thursday with probation, doing formal probation check-ins with the homeless population that's on formal probation, which is quite a few. So we have a good working relationship with the homeless shelter, and along with probation and health and human services, we can connect a lot of services there. For the question earlier about who is allowed at the shelter, the new shelter has done a very good job with making sure and confirming that every person in that shelter is a Placer County resident. It wasn't that way prior, but the new shelter director, that is a maximum enforcement thing. If they're not a Placer County resident, they're going to have to show proof of that. They do not go to the shelter. They get turned away. So the shelter is now for Placer County residents. And
Who's that effective? Sorry, I know you
June.
when the new shelter director took over.
When that Valentine?
Yeah.
Where did the people that are turned away go?
Auburn.
And that's one of the
We're trying to
things.
get, I've seen the stats and stuff, they're going down, and I think that's great. But
No, our stats are going up. All our contacts, all our arrests are going up.
So that's where we go to
That's
the
year to
enforcement.
date. 6 months, first 6 months of this year. That's why you saw the decline.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
And so, yes, they do end up coming back out into the community, and that's where the enforcement side of our job comes into place to make sure that the community is safe.
Is there any way to defer them, like where they're from? Or if they're unknown, send them down to somewhere they can handle it?
There are ways of reuniting people with family and friends, and that has been done in the past.
I deal with disabled vets. And if they're messed up, then we try to take care of them. There's certain protocol though, and there's certain things that happen that the VA says, we're not taking them.
There, and I'll answer your question, and it doesn't happen anymore, but I'll talk about, there used to be jurisdictional transfer amongst law enforcement agencies, and if you look at that's kidnapping. I mean, if somebody takes somebody from who doesn't want to leave Placer County and brings them to the city of Auburn, that's kidnapping. So we can't necessarily transfer them down to Sacramento as much as we'd like to.
So how do you know they're from Placer County if they don't have an address?
So, for them to get into the shelter, they have to have an ID with the Placer County address. When we run somebody out, we can find their last known address.
Last known address.
Whether they're a Sacramento resident, if they have any history at all in Placer County, or they're from Orangeville their whole life, and now magically they're in Auburn. So there's ways to find out their story. And like Lieutenant was saying, we know almost all of our Auburn transients that bounce back between the county and the city. So when we get somebody new, we know that they're not from here. And we work a lot with the Roseville team, because Roseville PD also has a team that does transient support. So we work with them as well, and we're very in touch with who's in the county, who's utilizing what services with probation and health and human services. We have a collaborative team that has done a really good job of knowing where these people are and where they're coming to and from.
Earlier this year, driving down Atwood by Edson, you used to see a number of homeless people milling around the government property, county property. Don't see anything. What has happened? Are they been moved out? What happened?
We're here.
Well, it's also because the shelter isn't open anymore.
The shelter's open.
No, I mean, it's 100 beds. People can't just come and get a mat like they were.
Correct.
Yeah, it's not the drop-in.
Correct.
There's one more question for the county over here.
I have a question, Lieutenant. So you talked about a date point of arrests. When you were bringing the team together, did you look back to see what those arrest numbers looked like prior to this focus group at all? Did you see a huge spike because now you're paying more attention? Or?
We haven't, no.
Okay. Okay. quick follow-up question. I'm sorry. Since we have representatives from the city and the county, if I get arrested in Roseville and transported to the county jail up here, and I punch out and I'm an address unknown, why don't the good people from Roseville come and get me and take me back to where I was arrested? I don't understand why not.
That's changed recently.
That's awesome.
If you're booked below Newcastle, you're booked in Roseville.
No, I know you're booked, but when I step out of jail, and I'm an address unknown, and I got no place to go, I can go to the shelter, or I can go just hang around in John's district.
You said if they're arrested,
We arrested you.
Newcastle, they get booked in the.
No, I said where I was booked. I was arrested in, wherever I'm arrested at. If I'm arrested in Rockland, or I'm arrested in Newcastle, why am I delivered back to where I did the crime? If I robbed him, she wouldn't get much. Why? You know, to show me I understand why that isn't a normal release process.
I wish I could answer that. I wish there was funding that would allow for us to transport people back to where they came from. But unfortunately, once they walk out their door, they're a free person. And our obligation at that point has ended for their safety and security.
So not much closure to that, they check out the door.
2 more questions here real quick. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any mental health statistics for the homeless population? And if so, how are the mental health issues being addressed?
That is addressed with our HHS worker, who directs them and can help facilitate the services that are needed for mental health and
again,
medication.
We established this. We asked Health and Human Service Director Brown to be here, and unfortunately he couldn't be here. And so, again, if you leave me your name and email address and ask me that question, write it down for me so I don't forget it, I'll get you the information. Because again, there's national statistics generally when you're talking with, and again, it's probably coming from the same website this gentleman referred to, as far as the number of people we're dealing with who have mental health issues. Yes, sir.
I can answer some of those, but I'm the sheep now. I'm giving up. She's an introvert. So the reporting on mental health and addiction and all that is self-reporting. And the HMIS system is in place to get a better report. But about 37% self-report a serious mental illness. That's a little bit low considering the national statistics of mental health, which is actually consistently getting worse every year. The release of the person out of custody on the streets goes back to the, maybe I'll thin ice here, but some of the lack of Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville, Auburn, and the county all collaborating and working together on a county-wide solution, even with the ordinances on how best to address that issue. And on the other issue, the engagement/enforcement officers from the county have done an excellent job. It is working, but it also comes at a cost at $1.2 million a year.
All right. John? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm wondering if there's any statistical correlation between the homeless shelter that we have now and our homeless population. Has that population rise or fallen?
It's difficult to say because we weren't tracking that data. Prior to, I think, 2015, we weren't even tracking it.
Okay.
And even then, our data that we started collecting was a bit obscure.
But since you have started tracking, is there a trend?
It seems to be pretty stagnant as far as consistent-wise. Calls for service, yes, they go up a little bit in the summertime, but over the past year it's maintained about between 35 and 40% of our calls for service have been transit-related in the North Auburn area.
Thank you.
And we're running about 25% here in the city of Auburn. Yes, ma'am.
I've been working as a dinner coordinator. John Petrero was a dinner coordinator before me. I was actually a volunteer up until 7 or 8 months ago. I've been doing it full time, and I can confirm that when I started volunteering, almost a year ago. I was actually the one that cleaned out that area before the program was being formulated. And about 8 months ago, I was feeding around 85 people. Now I'm feeding 100, and I've also, in the past couple of months, maybe 6 or 7 months, we've also grown from 100 people permanent residents, and now we have 50 in overflow. So those 50 people weren't even there when I started being there. Now we're having, we don't feed those overflow, they're there for the night and then they leave.
No.
But when I was there like 8 or 9 months ago, you know, more people were filtering in, so I'm feeding 100 people and they weren't as much.
All right. In the interest of time, like I said, let's go on to the next process thing here, and we're going to talk about code enforcement. And I'll start off the process, and I'll apologize, Public Works couldn't be here. Code enforcement falls under Public Works in the city of Auburn. However, we interact with Public Works and code enforcement on a regular basis, so I feel I'm capable of answering, talking about some of these issues, and somebody brought it up. You know, when we go through and we post a property or we post a tent, campsite, we give them a 72-hour notice basically to clear out. And I'm just going to go right down the list so I don't miss anything. And so I apologize, I'm reading on this PowerPoint. At that point, we're creating a file. We come back 72 hours, re-inspect the property. Best case scenario is they move somewhere else, cleaned up everything. Generally, that's not the case. So then we'll have to go ahead and photograph all the items being removed. And somebody talked about it, in some instances, it's truckloads. It's a lot of property. Photographing and posting on how to claim the property. Because what we do is, hey, you come down to the police department, we have your property. There's been suits saying basically, hey, I didn't know where to go pick up the property, so we actually photograph where we posted, telling them how to come pick up the property. Photograph the clean site. We have to put an ad in the Auburn Journal at our expenses, and I want to say right now it's running at about $156. That's incumbent upon the city. We put that in the paper, letting them know. We store the items in a secure location for up to 45 days past publication. So if the Journal's having a busy day and they don't get that ad in there for a couple days, then it could be 47 or 48 days. But it's 45 days past the publication. And currently we're using, and Recology is a wonderful working partner, not just in the county, but in Auburn also. And they're actually providing us a lockable dumpster, and we're putting the property in there. We'll meet with any claimants, they can come down, and then at the end of it, we can dispose of any remaining items. That is the code enforcement process. It is not an easy process to go through. It's extensive, but there's case law basically where law enforcement agencies have come in and basically taken all these people's property, threw it all away, and the agencies had lost some lawsuits that the attorney was referring to. Yes, sir.
So like when you do that, like have you guys had like more than one dumpster, or how do you budget for that, or does that just come out of like what you?
No, it's just going to come out of our general fund, out of our Public Works general fund. And again, we work really hard, and College is a wonderful partner because at one time we were actually having to rent storage space, rent Connex boxes for 45 days at a time to store this property. But Recology, being the wonderful partner that they are, they're providing us a locked instrument so we can store generally all the property in there, and then it's really easy for us to dispose of it at that point because there are disposal here.
Do you have any idea what kind of dollars you guys have spent on that? I mean, just erroneously, or just
thousands?
Okay.
I would imagine over. I mean, the $156 for every ad we post.
Paying officers to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And code enforcement, you know, if you start adding labor into it, it's going to add up.
So how can that be avoided?
Not letting the camps establish in the first place. That's the best thing. Clearing those green spaces that are areas where they might want to camp in town. Again, the West America Trail is a great example.
Auburn Ravine Trail.
What's that?
Auburn Ravine Trail.
Auburn Ravine Trail. We're working on that. That's going to come in our plan. We're coming down that road.
Okay.
And keeping those spaces and private property, having us, you know, letting us know if somebody gets in that space, because the next part is private property, and we will work with the property owner, and I'm going to read this right off here, and send a letter to the private property owner regarding the activity, request to have the property cleaned, suggest vegetation removal, fencing, posting signs, and routine monitoring by the property owner will help deter future activity. And again, because we have some absentee owners who live in this area, who actually don't live in this area, I'm sorry, that live in the Bay Area, live outside this area, but they own large swaths of property they don't necessarily maintain on a regular basis. And so again, those are where this is kind of where Mother Nature meets urban living right here in Auburn. And so we do have places, and we have to limit those paid places. And working with the community, I tell people I'd rather receive 10 phone calls than 0 phone calls. Don't think somebody else called about those transients walking down through a trail in the middle of the night. Call us on it. Let us go out and check it out. And so again, please call us, call us. Yes, sir.
The last two encampments that were on our map that was projected up there on the screen, it's not clear off here, were two extremely extensive encampments that were on our property.
Yep.
The reason that they developed and got as big as they did over multiple years was ARD didn't realize it was their property. They thought it was on private property. Turns out it was ARD.
And it was also down near the railroad tracks.
You had to cross the railroad tracks, so access was complicated. They spent multiple thousands of dollars to clear those areas out.
And again, we run into areas here where private meets public, and it doesn't happen as easy as we would all like to think. And again, this is property that ARD didn't even realize was theirs. But now they do, and now they did a really good job of cleaning it up. Yes, ma'am.
Are you guys finding that when you go to the campsites that you're finding like more criminal activity at these sites, or is it just a camping site?
No, we come across criminal activity. There's going to be some hypodermic needles, some remnants of drug use, and I'll let the county speak to it, what they're running. Always alcohol. And you guys are probably running into the same thing. Yeah. And so yes, I mean, very seldom do we run across a credit card scamming machine or anything like that, or any type of large-scale criminal activity like that. But again, the majority, well, not the majority, but a lot of people we're coming across, they do have electronic devices. And that's why Starbucks and Flower Garden is such a wonderful place to go, because you can get free Wi-Fi. And so again, I talked about a law office down here in Old Town. The reason, really, they were going into there because it was warm, it was out of the inclement weather, but they had Wi-Fi. And so I said, lock down your Wi-Fi. And so again, it's leave it for just employees. But the law library is there too. And we want to encourage people to go to the law library and use their free Wi-Fi. So again, it's that balancing act. Any questions in regard to code enforcement? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure the journal is the best way to get information out, and I'm wondering, do you use social media, and if so, what do you use?
We do have a Facebook page at the city and at the police department we utilize. I don't know much about it. I'm not a social media person, but we do use Facebook. We do get our press releases out there through Facebook. We had this meeting posted on our Facebook, so please friend the Auburn PD Facebook, and you can distribute it. If we're putting it out there to the journal, it's going up on our Facebook page also. Yes, ma'am.
To that end, is there a place that I'm unaware of where you actually practice transparency and the public can see monthly, weekly, or quarterly the calls that have come in, the type of calls that they are, and the outcome?
As far as calls for service?
Well,
Okay, yeah, you can come right into our lobby. We put our calls for service on our lobby. The press comes down there and looks at our board. But we don't publish those out there. No, we don't. I don't have that capability. I don't have enough staff to get that online in that way. But if it's in our front lobby, and that's how the local Auburn Journal comes down and finds out about our arrests. They come down find out about our calls for service. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Is that where the data that you got, the first set of data that you got when you came in, was it extracted from that report?
No, this is much deeper than that. But what I gave right here is much deeper than that. And again, not everything is going to be, this is all hand-counted data. And so again, but where you can find a lot of our information is crimereports.com. Yeah. Crimereports.com. We do subscribe to that, and a lot of data is filtered up into that. And so we pay for that service. Crimereports.com, you put in Auburn, California, and it'll populate up there our calls for service. They're generally running a few days behind, but it does get up there. So that is, again, but I don't have analysts populating that data, putting it up on a website. No, I don't have that type. I wish I did, but that's a very expensive endeavor.
Are you accepting volunteers?
Yes, we are. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Something you said just kind of resonated, that you don't have the staff to put things online and all this. That the storage is coming out of the general fund. And you said a couple of different times, essentially said this is costing a lot of money.
This is expensive.
Yes. It's becoming very expensive. And unless the city's flush with cash.
No one is. No governmental agency.
Exactly.
Except Washington,
Well, I was
D.C.
going to say, I know one. Yeah, it's a great retirement plan too. That is becoming very expensive. It does need to be done, but there should be a better way.
I agree with you. And government is becoming more and more expensive to keep law enforcement. And like I told you, started out the story, 30 years ago, we weren't dealing with this. Now we are. So again, we're having to manage the same resources in crime that's trending up.
And the sheriff, 30 years ago, their jails weren't a mental health hospital.
No, they weren't.
Which is a lot of what they have to deal with now.
And
I
you're
know
right.
times are changing.
It is changing, and again, we're trying, the best way to cut the costs is prevent it from happening in the first place.
Always.
So prevention goes a lot farther than enforcement any day of the week. So again, if we can get a large-scale camp that's not 2 years old, and we can get it posted and cleaned out in the first week because a citizen called us on it, that's going to be better off than finding 2 years later that this is our property.
Right. Well, and getting those people engaged into some sort of program.
Sure.
So that you're just not pushed.
It's squeezing the balloon. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So just a couple quick things, and I'm going to bounce a little bit off what the gentleman just said. This is just a specific piece of the code enforcement and compliance program that you have.
This has to do generally with posting for homeless properties. Yes,
Right.
one specific piece.
Right. So, so how do you look at then making this an unattractive area for these types of people to come to? And we had this discussion in several meetings, is how do we look at Auburn and create sort of quality of life in this town that's unattractive to those people, but attractive to the 13,000 citizens who are here? How do you arrive at that? And you would like to go from enforcement to prevention. That occurs to me that could go a long way.
Absolutely.
So from perhaps a public works perspective, from the city management, what are we doing strategically to look at, making Auburn beautiful and making sure that things like the trail don't just be like that for years? And you said you were approached by someone who said, we're very unhappy you found a person who was camping up there for 17 years.
We did. We were in this very meeting where we had citizens complaining we took this person's home away by cleaning out a hillside.
Right.
That's not a home.
No, it's not his home. We
But-
apologize for letting it happen for 15 years, and it's still our bad.
But we still have people in our community who thought that was wrong for us to do.
No, I get that, but we still had to do it, guys.
Yes.
And I apologize, but you shouldn't have been there 15 years ago either. So how do we not perpetuate that anymore? How do we collectively as a city say, this is what we want to be about? We can't ask John to cite for the rest. We can't do that. We can't let overgrown parks continue. We just can't. So maybe there's more coming. I don't mean to jump on anybody else's presentation.
Actually, this gentleman kind of hit the nail on the head early on. And if you go back 5 years ago when we had a real big visual homeless problem again, we sat down first, we grouped with all of the nonprofits. We said, what the heck do we have going on? And they're actually a tremendous group of folks to work with, full of knowledge. They don't like seeing the abuses out there any more than we do. So we all sat down, talked it through, and we went out into the community, and we went out in the field. We would go out in the field in the bush, we would sit with these folks. We'd sit on street corners when they were panhandling, talking to them, getting to know them, to get them to finally start to say what's going on. And then they would start to tell you, oh yeah, I come in every day, I live in a house, this is our job, panhandling. We get drawn in with 6 other guys in a bus, we get dropped off, this is where we work, we get picked up at 5 o'clock, we go home, and we make a huge amount of money. And so it's frustrating on a number of fronts because the nonprofits are trying to get people to get jobs, get back into the workforce. They find jobs for folks. They won't want to take them. There's too much money being made here. So it became very apparent at that point in time, the population that was the most problematic for us here in Auburn were the panhandlers. And that's why we ultimately came up with those little business cards that opened up. And the real issue there was we wanted to educate all of you on how many services were truly available. That if you wanted to help them, don't give them money, give them that card, which we passed out everywhere. Give them the darn card, so if they needed help, they could go get it, but don't put money in their hands, because that was going to drugs and alcohol, and that was it. Worked great, it was wonderful. A couple things there though. Within just weeks, they almost all disappeared. Panhandling left Auburn as far as the real aggressive and large numbers of it, because the money dried up. Y'all did great, it was awesome watching. That we started in October, at the end of November we stopped it, and because the population tends to ebb and flow here. The winter months, they go down the hill, spring hits, they start to move back up. That stayed in place for quite a while. What we have now is a whole different population. They're motivated by different things. They're not the aggressive panhandlers that we had in the past. Yeah, it happens, but nothing to the same degree. What's motivating these folks? We don't have it yet. This winter, we're going to sit down with the nonprofits again. We're going to try to work on this problem the same way we did before. And then when we see the population start coming back in, it's time for us to get back out in the field, grow your hair long, get your jeans on, and sit there and talk and try to figure out what the heck is motivating them to come back here. And then if we get a decent consensus, how do we strategize to take away the motivation? Motivation used to be a real easy dollar. It's not today to the same extent. We need to work that through. And it just takes a little bit of time to really get that handled correctly, to the extent we can. In the meantime, we have gone and addressed every single encampment in this town that we know is out there. Every one of them. And the job now is to continue to go back out and make sure they don't repopulate. And that is going on constantly. The last cleanup job we just did, we watched exactly where they marched down to and where they're living now. And we're scheduling that cleanup. And when that's done, they're going to march right down to another location. And we're going to go, and we're just going to stay on. So the gross population, numbers of population, the people living out in the bush is definitely lower. If we get all of you calling us and letting us know, hey, we're seeing them starting to move in at this location, that's great, because then we can go and get it cleaned up. And it's just an ongoing effort. As that ongoing effort stays in place, which is constant displacement, that's all it really is, we're going to then start working first with those nonprofits, and then as people start coming back up the hill, we're going to start interviewing them and meeting them out with doing whatever they're doing in their locations, try to figure out really why they want to be here. And then how do we undo that? And I'm sorry, I know you had a question.
No, I do. Have we done any, or has there been any benchmarking done with other cities that have a success in cleaning up the homeless population? Because I know there's some cities that, whether you want to call them affluential or whatever, they won't tolerate it. And we do. I mean, New York looks different than San Francisco. Although New York's not looking as good as it once did. San Francisco, I spend more time there than I'd like to for work. It's terrible and it's getting worse every day. But there are other cities that don't tolerate it. So do we have the opportunity to do some benchmarking with them, find out what works?
This is great, and the city manager and I have talked about reaching out, because again, the Placer County has a really good program and what they're doing. Roseville, and they mentioned that has something that we're doing. We have to decide, do we need to dedicate a team, or can we continue to do it with our current staff and overtime? And again, going down the Bay Areas in the East Bay, there's some beautiful cities down there, and I've spent some time there and riding along their bike trails, and I didn't see any homeless people. So again, yes, we do need to, that's great, and we do need to do that, and that's part of this long-term plan to find out what are these cities. But to answer your question, have we been benchmarked? No. Is that part of the long-term plan? Absolutely.
It's interesting. I mean, it's a constant topic of conversation in our field. I mean, everybody's hit with it. What's working, what's not. And it's one of those very malleable issues. You can attack it one day and be real successful. 6 months later, boom, it's back. So it's something you're constantly staying on. But I was down in Old Town the other day, and a homeless guy had just gotten into town. He had a dog, and some lovely, well-meaning ladies come in with a whole bag of dog food to greet him. Welcome to Auburn. And we got a lot of great people here. But right now, the mindset isn't all the same in this community by any stretch of the imagination. And so we can have folks that are so upset, and understandably so. On the other hand, we have folks that look at this entirely differently and are pulling everything out of their closets and refrigerators to try to help people. That always creates a problem in a community. It's hard to succeed one way or the other, one direction or the other, when you have that kind of dichotomy going on. And so my hope is we can get a better understanding on why Auburn has become real popular again and undo that to a certain degree.
And you mentioned a great thing in New York, and you talked about that, the broken windows policy. That's where that all implemented from a law enforcement setting down on the grassroots. But now they're determined that broken window policy, they're looking at how we're doing business like that, and they're changing our way of business because they're saying you're profiling. So again, there's a lot of great programs out there, but the long-term success, yes, if you look at Times Square before and then you look at it now, obviously it's a much better place.
That
But
was just one.
That was just one.
Small area that they cleaned
Absolutely,
out.
no. But the broken windows policy did the whole city.
And they're going, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
For all homes here, but Times Square is one.
Absolutely. Man, you had a question, you've been holding your hand up for a while.
My question is, why is it, you can cite these people for manhandling, why can't we cite the people who are giving to the
I don't know, let's see if the city attorney can make an ordinance to do that.
You saw somebody in
I did.
15 minutes, you saw all these people
I did.
and they $24 an hour. Come on.
And again, that's a great idea. And so maybe we do need to go after so I don't know if that's legal, but I'll look into this. Yes, ma'am.
Hang on one second, John.
Oh.
This community just did great. Once they started to understand that if you gave money to the panhandlers, it wasn't going to the right spot. We shot videos talking to them. And even when you gave them a burger from Burger King, they go and sell it.
They don't want it.
Yeah, they don't want it. They
No, they
go
want
and
the
sell
dollar
it.
you're going to give them for their soda.
Once our folks knew what to do, though, they did a brilliant job, and the panhandlers left. Their money dried up. We need to get back and figure out why today, and hopefully come up with those same kind of solutions to engage everybody in. That's just going to take a little bit of time.
So what you're saying is educate people?
Yep. That's a huge part of our job.
And this is just the
What's
start.
the message today? We don't know yet, because this is a new and different population, are homeless. They don't need the money and they don't want the money. They've got social service money. There's not as big an emphasis on gathering money as there is on just living here. We need to understand that better.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand the Downtown Business Association just bought a couple of bikes for your officers. Is that part of this whole plan?
I haven't seen those bikes yet. I've heard about them, but I haven't seen them. We're still talking it through, and for me to accept a donation, I have to get them to approve it. And I know I haven't had them approve it yet, so those bikes aren't in existence
Is
yet.
that kind of part of this idea?
Again, we have to think about would a bike patrol be viable down there? And again, there is some areas, but we're not sneaking up on the homeless. They're not. They're sneaking up on us. And so again, bike patrol, you can get into some alleyways and stuff like that, because I did bike patrol in my career when I was in Southern California. But bike patrol is probably not going to solve the homeless issue downtown. And I just worked with a business owner down there who they were coming into his back patio down in downtown in the middle of the night. One, I created some extra patrols. I didn't know what was happening, but I went and suggested some lights and stuff like that. Make it, as they said, uncomfortable. If somebody comes up and it's dark, of course you can sleep there. But if you got a bright floodlight out there, they're not going to go to sleep there. So again, just making some suggestions and working with the community. But I've heard about the bikes, but they're not online quite yet. Mr. Mayor.
So I think, and again, one of the things that we're hoping to get out of this is to educate everybody that the best tool that you guys can help us at the city with is your eyes. John and his staff has a limited number of eyeballs that are out there on the streets where the encampments are. We think we got them all, but we also know that there's new encampments that are created tonight. So if you see something, if you see, drunk people in public or whatever it might be, pick up the phone and call the police department, and they'll send somebody out to interact with them and check on them, make sure we know that they're what's going on.
John, one of the questions that we've gotten a lot of is, when do I call? Do I call because somebody's loitering? Do I call because someone's panhandling? Do I call because somebody's drunk?
If it looks unusual to you, call. Definitely if they're drunk. If you think they're trespassing or you think they're loitering, call us. Let us check it out. And again, if we have priority calls going on and we can't get there right away, we will get there. The Auburn Police Department goes to every call for service. That is my direction. And again, it might not be on my time limit, it might not be on yours, because again, there's other extenuating circumstances. But other agencies outside the area don't go to every call for service. You call, we come. And we've been working on, we call Lieutenant Pecoraro, it's his idea, closing the loop. Is we generally go to a call, we do something, but we wouldn't let you know we did it. Then you'd like, hey chief, I called him out there, nothing was done. Well, we're working on closing that loop and having our officers call you back and let us know that what we did. It's still not perfect, but we're working on it. We want to close that loop so that you have no doubt in your mind the Auburn Police Department came out there and did provide some type of service. It might not be the service that you provided, would like, it might not be everything I would like, but at least we did something. Yes, sir.
And I heard earlier on, a member of the public mentioned the word interview. I would much prefer to have our law enforcement conducting these interviews and interactions with the homeless population, transient population, than members of the public. We don't know what they're on, if they're on anything, if they've got mental illness going on, whatever the situation could be. I would much prefer to have our trained professionals interacting with folks out on the streets than members of the public.
I had a meeting today in our second office at Starbucks, of course, because we're cops. But I had a meeting over there with the retired fire chief today, and I went over there, and before I got out of the car, I put on my vest, I had a shirt and tie on, and there was a guy panhandling, and I walked up, I said, you gotta go, because he's too close to the freeway. And so again, no matter what it is, you let us, if there's somebody panhandling, call us. Yes, it's just something we see every day, we have to address it every single day. So continue to call us. Yes, ma'am.
How would it be handled if it's someone panhandling and then children with them? I've been seeing that quite a bit here in town.
And again, the city manager, we've actually spoken to people who were dropped off. They didn't know the kids they were with. Yeah. They did not know the kids they were with. It was an organized panhandling organization. They didn't know the kids they were with.
How do you respond to that?
Huh?
You got kids and you got a grown adult. How do you respond to it?
We need to find out who that kid was. We had to call up CPS, and they were all there. They were not their kid. So they had legally, they could be with them, but again, we run into all kinds of weird things out there. Yes, ma'am.
So in regards to your question about, what motivates them to stay here, what motivates them on, living in this area, in my experience, it's like several of us have said, it's a very helpful and caring locals here.
That's why we all live here, right?
Well, yeah, and that's great that we have so many nice people in this community, but at the same time, I've heard this word several times spoken in my face, is that we're enabling the homeless. We're feeding them on these nonprofit, these money that's coming in. I'm purchasing these foods for the shelter. I'm doing all the work myself, and that is enabling them. But what I'm trying to do when we don't have a church coming in is I drop the food off and I say, you take care of yourself. You put those gloves on, you sign in, you wash your hands, you do the work. But some are willing. I feel like we should put them to work. If they're not willing, what can we do to help them? What can we do about those who live on that enablement? Because it's kind of 50-50. Some people, I've spoken to them, they're like, I really want to work, I really want to do this. I've invited one homeless person from that residence to my church to help with hospitality of our foods, and that guy eventually became financially stable. I haven't seen him since. He's got a nice job, he's got his own apartment, but there are some people who I've given gift cards to, and they're like, sorry man, I just want money. I'm like, that's your fault, I'll give this to someone else who needs it, who actually wants to do
And
that.
again, I think that goes back to that whole education of our citizens, letting them know what they can do that's beneficial, that actually helps the population, and doesn't hurt the individual. Yes, sir.
Right. So just to be clear, there's lots of very giving and caring people around. Auburn is, so is Roseville, so is Granite Bay, so Downey, California. So, we are caring, we are giving, but there's lots of communities out there. That's an issue. To your point, there is absolutely empirical evidence that handing out food, clothing, just makes the problem worse. You still are kind of talking about two different populations. You're going to be talking about transients, panhandling, panhandles for professional organizations,
absolutely,
and those who are actually homeless. But she has a point where there's a couple of things. first and foremost, there's way too many nonprofits, all duplicating the same thing. Many of them just trying to keep the doors open, running on old methodologies that have long since been proven not to work. Housing is always the first and foremost solution to the problem. It has been that way now for 17 years. But until the organizations say, no, we're going to change our way, and as you mentioned, until they, faith-based groups and all that, kind of stop the food shelters, the clothing shelters, and things of this nature, that is directly going to the homeless, then yeah, you're still going to have a problem. But remember, there's still a lot of families out there that are living in rental units that survive off that bag of groceries
Yep.
and that food.
And I don't want to take that away.
And they couldn't afford it.
And we don't want to take that away. All right, yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious if we have any demographics on deaths due to the elements.
We've had a few, not a lot.
The average homeless person dies 10 to 15 years younger.
Right. And so again, the sheriff department would probably have more of that. We are not the coroner. The coroner's office would probably have those statistics, and so I can't answer that. Okay, moving on, again, because we're getting towards that end of the time. What we're going to continue to do, if there's foliage that you think the city can address, bring it to our attention. And on each of the flyers, you have my email address, you have my direct desk. I don't have a secretary, so you're going to get me if I'm there, and I'm going to answer the phone. We've started to identify some of the areas where the foliage is overgrown. We can continue to do that. If you have other examples of ordinances that we don't have here, bring them to our attention. I'm not opposed to putting anything before the city council. We are working on a few ordinances, the marijuana ordinances. And again, we're worried about drinking in public. Well, we need to start worried about smoking in public here, coming up here pretty quickly. And being that we're in a foothill community, there's a lot of dry brush up here. So if they're sitting around getting high and there's not a lot of law enforcement can do about it, and that bong falls over and starts a fire, it's going to concern all of us. So again, we're looking at updating our marijuana ordinance here in the next month.
Are you finding any of the transits growing?
No,
No.
not yet. Not yet. But we find a lot of other people growing.
Oh, yeah. They love mine.
We're working on that. The camping ordinance, we're going to continue to work on that. The other thing that we're working on coming up with is, and we think this will be a really beneficial, and it won't be able to do existing businesses until they cause a problem, but stopping single serve. What I mean by that is not selling single beers and not selling airport bottles here in town. Making somebody buy a 6-pack or buy a large bottle. And not that I want to get them any more drunker, but buying a large bottle of Jack Daniels at $25 is a lot more expensive than buying it at $2 here. So again, we're looking at updating our ordinance in regard to that. And as the attorney said, and I'll use a baseball adage because my Dodgers are playing right now. And
Amen, brother.
what's that?
Amen, brother. God help us if we have to face the Yankees.
Exactly. The city of Auburn, we cannot afford to swing and miss here. And I mean, what I mean by that is we cannot afford to risk a lawsuit that's going to risk putting our city in financial instability. And we can't do that. So again, we err on the side of caution until we have to take action, and we take action. But again, we aren't trying to set trends here or anything like that. We do. Our marijuana ordinance is mirroring Rockland and Roseville's. And again, one is for consistency, and two is why reinvent the wheel. Some of our camping ordinances, we've looked at other places and what they're doing. And so again, because we cannot afford to swing and miss here. This is whether it's civil rights violations where I could go to jail for doing the arrest, or whether it's the civil courts that would pay out this. We don't want to do that. The other thing, and she's here, probation works really carefully with the county and coincides with their program. We've upgraded our investigative bureau, so we've added 2 spots. We've worked with probation. Probation is going to be in the police department here very, very shortly. So having that resource available to us when we're going out and contacting these people on a regular basis will be a huge benefit to the city of Auburn. Because again, we have people who are homeless on probation here in the city. And having them work closely with our officers and closely with our detectives will definitely be a huge benefit to us. camping ordinance, marijuana, yep, single size. All right, that's a lot of information. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Actually, just a core comment. This obviously is going to take a really holistic approach to.
Absolutely.
Like you said before, you can't arrest everyone out of this. There's a lot of stakeholders involved. Different agencies. There's people, groups that aren't here, ARD, state parks. It sounds like maybe some service groups are, maybe not all support groups are as well. But I didn't hear a lot about community involvement on this. And I heard Mayor Stokely, you mentioned eyes and ears, perhaps volunteer.
And I did say I accept the volunteers. I made that
clear. But I think something that's going to be important is really bringing the community more closely involved in defining solutions here. And some have talked about doing either an ad hoc or a permanent type committee with the city, with different stakeholders involved. And I think there maybe are some short-term things or more moderate-term things that, as a group, we can we can figure out if it's some of the ordinances and operating standards for retail and things like that, or whatever. But I think I would encourage those here, particularly in City Council and some of the other city leaders here, to really look at that as an approach to bring in. There's quite a few citizens here, and there's several that come on a weekly basis to city council meetings, and I think there'd be people that are interested in being involved in helping to find a solution.
Well, I think the mayor was going to address that in his final. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, clearly this is an important issue. We have 4 or 5 council members here.
3.5.
That one alone. We're doing everything we can to help manage this situation, and that's what it is. We're managing this situation. We know that whatever we do has some effect and some bearing on what happens in Placer County just across that city-county line. So I'm happy that the folks from Placer Sheriff's Department and Probation were able to join us. We're trying to help human services here. It does have to be a holistic approach, and yes, the community, the citizens are a big part of it.
Are you looking at it as Auburn as separate from South Placer County? Or are you saying that you're working with Lincoln, Rockland, Roseville also?
It's holistic. It's going to be all of them. I pointed to Placer County guys. They're here. We know that we've got kind of an ebb and flow of folks and transients, North Auburn, Auburn, North Auburn, Auburn. I haven't heard that much about the ebb and flow heading down to the South County area.
Is that not?
Yeah, there's a lot of flow from Roseville up here and from here down there, but there's a lot of flow between North Auburn and here. So obviously we work with them, we garner information from them, but on a day-to-day basis, our officers and the deputy sheriffs and probation are working more on a line level between.
3 different populations. It's the South Placer County population.
Sure.
It's the Auburn Corridor population, and then you got the top.
Absolutely.
So it's really 3 different.
Absolutely.
Why don't we spend more time sending them back home? I'm legitimately asking. I know of 2 right now. We've got one person here in Placer County on probation. He is from Reno, Nevada. Okay? He's on probation he had problems a long time ago, was in prison. He got arrested for DUI. Okay? His family is in Reno. He is forced to stay in Placer County. He is on probation. He is on probation. He would love to go back to Reno. We would then no longer have a homeless person in this county using our resources. Send him back, okay?
And so that's, again, working with the court system and working with probation to come up with the ability for us to do that.
Bingo, send him home. Give him back to the damn state. He won't come back. I know it. I know him. Okay? The second person, I use my miles. He is now in South Carolina. The homeless shelter called him. Can you help? His family wants him to come home. It costs me $5.60 and 11,000 miles on Southwest. Minus Poe is in South Carolina with his family. Why can't we start looking into sending these people home? I mean, instead of feeding them every night, send them home. It's.
I guess the miles. Again, very unique idea using donating miles to.
60 cents.
Thank
And
you very
he's-
much.
And we're gonna thank you.
Next time, give me 5,000 of those. She's right. I mean, law enforcement, you can't just pick up somebody.
No, he won't do it.
But that is part of the solution. If you have everybody working together, there's plenty of organizations out there in this country that have set up a method where they can return them back to their home. Doesn't always work, but again, a couple drops in the bucket, you can, it works. So, but you have to get the nonprofits all working on the same page, thinking the same way. And right now you have one shelter in Roseville and one shelter in Auburn, and they're different organizations. They don't necessarily work well together, so I'm doing any fuss there.
Mayor, you have anything else before we wrap it up? You have anything?
No, just to thank everybody again for coming out. Apparently there's a baseball game going on tonight, so.
Not a baseball game, a Dodger.
Baseball. That is blasphemy.
They're losing.
Yeah, guess who's losing?
That's all right, they won't be in a minute.
John, I think we have a few more questions.
Okay.
I guess I'm not hearing what the next step is.
There you go.
I understand that we have a group of citizens here that really want to contribute and help and volunteer. So we need to be able to put together some type of communication channel at Little Beach. I mean, obviously Facebook is a great platform for that. But who's gonna do that? Because John, if you need volunteers, do you have those silos already identified so that the right type of person can jump in there?
And that's a great question. What is the next step? And to me, and I'm not speaking for anybody else here who's presented or talked, this was a way, to start the dialogue and to find out what people are willing to do. If I have some volunteers and I have some need for volunteers, we need to connect. And again, find out exactly what you thought some of the issues were. You guys have brought some great ideas to the table. Let us sit around, strategize, and find out what we should do as a governmental agency that's responsible for the city and the next step we should take. And some of that might be law enforcement based, some of that might be getting our faith-based groups together and getting them, like he said, all on the same page so we're all working in the same direction. And so again, to me, this was just the start. I didn't expect to provide you all the answers tonight. It was really just to exchange ideas so we can move forward and again, getting that information out there. And I don't know how you found out about this, but we're going to use probably some of the same mechanisms. Friend the Auburn PD Facebook. And so again, you will get updates into what our next steps are. You will get updates onto who we're arresting because when we do a press release that gets put on our Facebook quickly, it doesn't always make the journal, but it does make our Facebook page. And so
I'm sorry, I may have come in a few minutes late, but did you collect everybody's names and emails?
I was just going to say, Alex.
I did.
We had 4 to 5 councilmen here tonight. This is a very important issue for the city. If folks would want to be involved with a group or committee, would give their names to Director Ruffmore before they leave tonight.
Or write them down for me.
Write them down for Mr. Director Ruffmore. That would be great. If you want to
cell phone, I have the number.
I got a question with the very important man right there in the back.
I just wanted to touch on her thing, the sheriff's office at the beginning and even in the middle and even now we tried multiple times to do what we call communication with folks. There's a process, obviously, that we go back to the whole kidnapping thing, we don't really want to can't quite do that. We probably done no less than 5, 6, 7 of them, where we've connected with families across the United States, some north, some south, some east, and it hasn't been very successful, honestly. The nonprofit groups have flipped out money to these people who are ready to go, and just for whatever reason, it's just not been successful.
If you remember a few years ago, Las Vegas was doing that and sending them to LA. Nonprofits were paying for it. And
No, I'm talking, it has to be to a family.
no, they were sending them to different jurisdictions.
This was to a family and contact with the family.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't have families. I know several guys.
They're stuck here, but what I'm saying is we need to.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say that with all the work that's been done, it is doing something. My husband and I never used any of the nonprofits, like nonprofits or anything to get on our own. What actually helped us was the men and women officers from both APD and Placer County and probation officers. They would actually take the time to sit with us and talk to us every time they contacted us. Like whether there was a complete crime or whether it was domestic violence or, you know, just a check-in to see how we were doing. Every time they sat down and talked to us, they gave us more confidence in ourselves and our marriage that we were able to bring ourselves up without having to reach out for help.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Estes.
Thank you very much. To the fact that trying to communicate, one of the things I just started on my own has got a lot of traction here because this homeless situation, as you know, is a big problem, and it's going to take the community to solve it. And Auburn is a wonderful community. I've lived here for 34 years, and it's the people of Auburn that really make us special. But what I noticed was that just there wasn't a good conduit of information. People were trying to do things through social media. That's not the most effective way. So to that end, I started a website called auburnpeople.org. And it's supposed to be, the objective there is a newsletter and information gathering. And my objective is to build a collaborative effort in the region for not only the citizens, but also the businesses. We need more businesses involved in this to make this effective action. We can solve this issue. The police department cannot solve it alone. It's been mentioned many times over. Dave, what do you say a street homeless person costs the community?
A street level homeless person, according to HUD data, costs $40,000 per person per year. That's the average throughout the country. If you take that person, you house that person, you can reduce that by as much as $27,000 per person per year.
So it's not only a community problem, and as you can see, a crime situation by roaring statistics, but also a financial situation. So pass these cards around. If you would just go to auburnpeople.org, there's a place for you to register your email. And if you will do that, we will inform people. I know the newsletter was sent out. I don't know how many people here got the newsletter. That's the reason I'm here, but that's the objective, is to build a collaborative effort and information. And I think the information given here was wonderful. It really was great input. We just need to do more and more and more of this. If we can get the information out there, if we can get everyone on board, and we can resolve this issue and do it and improve it. So, auburnpeople.org, please go there and register.
I want to thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate it. I didn't know how many people, I didn't know if we'd have overflow, and I thank you all for coming. I agree with Mr. Estes. I think there was a good exchange of information. Lieutenant Pecoraro and I have both taken down some notes. I saw the county people taking down some notes because even some of the information that you passed to us we'll be able to use. And like I said, this is just the first step. This is not one of those things where this is going to stop, because it's not going away. And so we as a community, all of us, businesses, private people, governmental agencies, we all need to address this together. And so again, I want to thank you. Now I'll be available for questions if you want to come up afterwards.
Thank you very much, Mark.